Extra. Dear treasures, this is a full story update in one go. Read and cherish it. The thrilling tale begins right now. I've been in an online relationship with my girlfriend for 3 years. The hardest days. I was there helping her through bit by bit. Then one day, we finally met in real life, and my lover turned against me. The reason is none other than this. The one who stayed with me for 3 years was also my bully's accomplice. Later on, Liu Ryan returned to herself everything she had done to me, one by one. She begged for my forgiveness, begged me to come back. But in this world, things are not so easily balanced, and debts aren't so easily cleared. When Liu Ryan cornered me against the wall, I was just sending a message to Yanyan baby pinned at the top of my WeChat. Something's come up tonight. I'll play games with you a little later. The dim street lamp cast its glow, leaving only a patch of light at the corner. The message was sent. I clenched my fist, and just as I raised my head, I heard a notification sound. The next moment, through the gap in the crowd, I saw Liu Ryan standing by the wall, her gaze fixed on her phone. The cold sharpness in her eyes softened in an instant. A gentle smile appeared at the corners of her eyes. She leaned closer to her phone's microphone, her voice low, hushed, and obedient. No worries, sweetheart. I happen to have a little something to do too. Just find me when you're done. The people in front of me fell silent. The phone in my hand vibrated once. I lowered my gaze and caught a voice message from Yanyan baby. You're lucky. Apologize. Liu Ryan put away her phone, her eyes looking back at me, cold and ruthless once more. Say it and you can go. Sister Yan, the man standing next to her shouted in dissatisfaction. Liu Ryan ignored him and took a cigarette from the middle of her pack. Someone beside her tried to offer her a light, but she didn't take it. The person's features in front of me overlapped with those from past photos. Liu Ryan stood on the far side, the light only illuminating half of her face, distinct between light and shadow, but she was still excessively beautiful. I felt a bit dazed. Half was my Yanyan, half was Liu Ryan. The strength in my hands suddenly loosened. I shook my head. Okay, Liu Ryan spoke calmly. Without looking at me again, she merely exchanged a glance with someone. Fists and kicks landed on me, one after another. The places hit throbbed with pain. Threats, curses, one by one drilling into my ears, along with Gu Wuyan's triumphant laughter. I curled up, holding my head tightly, not knowing how long it had been. When I opened my eyes again, the figures at the corner had long disappeared. I had provoked Gu Wuyan. He had been a detestable person for quite some time, relying on his delinquent girlfriend. He swaggered around the school. On Wednesday, while I was in the cafeteria line for food, he suddenly appeared with his lackeys, without any greeting, blatantly cutting into the line, right in front of me. If it were any other day, I might have exchanged a few words with him first, but that day I was starving. I had forgotten to have breakfast in the morning. By the third glass, my hunger was unbearable, so I pushed him, but I had forgotten. My strength is considerable. That push knocked him right off, landing him hard on his butt. The sound of Gu Wuyan hitting the ground wasn't small. The whole area suddenly fell silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on us. He probably had never been treated like this before. His face turned beet red, like an overinflated red balloon about to burst. I was just about to apologize to him when the cafeteria lady called out to me. What are you having, student? Don't dawdle. People are still waiting in line. I froze, momentarily forgetting about Gu Wuyan on the ground. I gave my order to the lady. By the time I finished getting my food, he was already gone. I thought about it for a moment and felt that he was the one at fault first, so I figured we were even. But it seemed to me, Gu Wuyan clearly didn't think the same. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked his girlfriends, underlings, to teach me a lesson, and I wouldn't have been beaten by my own girlfriend and her gang. When I returned to the dormitory, my clothes were soaked in filthy water, dirty and stinking. My roommate covered his nose, his face full of surprise. Boda, what happened to you? I accidentally fell on the way back. He sighed in relief. Hurry up and take a shower. I nodded and took off the mask from my face. The phone in my pocket vibrated again. Sweetie, what are you doing? Are you done yet? Why aren't you replying to me? Sweetie? I didn't reply, pressed the screen lock button, and went into the bathroom. Liu Ryan and I had been in an online relationship for 3 years, but we had never met in person. When we first met, she called me G-Boater. Later, as we grew closer, she started calling me Boater. And then, she confessed her love to me and started calling me Sweetie. We've known each other for almost 3 years, and in the meantime, her grandmother passed away. During that time, we spoke on the phone 5 times a day. She talked about her grandmother until her voice turned hoarse, or she would break into tears. I would be on the other end crying with her, crying while trying to comfort her. I knew everything about her childhood. Listening to her reminisce about those youthful days she could never return to, the only period she truly cherished. My browser history was filled with searches like, how to comfort someone after the death of a loved one. Sometimes she would call me in the middle of the night. The city at 3 a.m. was pitch dark. I was awakened by the ringing, sitting up in bed, staring at the ink black night, crying with her. Later, Liu Ryan slowly came out of her grief. Time proved that the best comfort indeed was companionship. Even though we had never met, whenever she needed me, I would be there. She said, Sweetie, I'm so glad you were there. When I received this message, my good friend Ito Makoto happened to see it. He snickered. Didn't expect you to have so much free time. Comforting a complete stranger across a screen. I lowered my gaze, staring at the screen, responding indirectly. Isn't it fascinating? The internet is truly remarkable. Liu Ryan's profile picture was a cat, softly smiling at me. Just looking at it made my mood improve. It can turn to people who have never met into what society considers an intimate relationship. Even the companionship through a screen can become someone else's salvation. My fingers tapped out a line of text on the screen, and I clicked send. I will be there for you. What can I say? I looked at Ito Makoto and smiled. Is this the greatness of love? The sound of water in the bathroom suddenly stopped. I wrapped myself in a towel, and when I came out, my roommate pointed to the phone on the table. Boda, your girlfriend called several times. I told her you were in the shower. Thanks, I replied softly. Her eyes fell on my arm, and she exclaimed again, how did you fall? How could it be this serious? Just so happens I have some bruise ointment. Come over, let me rub it in for you. Pain spread from the bruised areas. I bit my lip, trying not to make a sound. The pungent smell of the medicine filled the small room. I typed a reply to Liu Ryan. I finished showering. Immediately, a sticker popped up from her side, as if she had been waiting for my response. Kiss JPG, are we playing games tonight, sweetie? I thought for a moment, and replied, not tonight. Today, what about today? My eyes flickered, and I continued typing. Today, I ran into someone cutting in line, so I gave him a push. He said he'd get someone to teach me a lesson. The typing double quotes indicator jumped on the other side. Before turning into the other party is speaking, voice messages popped up one after another. I didn't open them. I just replied, it's nothing really. He didn't come after me. He cuts in line and still thinks he's right? Liu Ryan asked. More and more voice messages kept appearing, long and short, piling up, but my eyes only focused on that single text reply. I couldn't help it, and burst out laughing. What's up? My roommate asked, puzzled. Tears of laughter gathered at the corners of my eyes. I raised a hand to wipe them away. Just saw a funny joke. Our chats never stopped for even a single day. Liu Ryan sent me many photos. There was a brilliant sunset in the evening. Clusters of unknown wildflowers by the edge of the grass. A sky so blue and pure. And one more. It was of her standing in her garden, smiling at the camera, her white dress lifted by the wind, her young figure standing tall. Amidst the orchid trees, her smile like the bright moon, she said, "Sweetie, this photo is especially for you. Maybe one day you'll recognize me on the street." I said, "There's no such coincidence in the world." Now I realize I was wrong. There are even more coincidental things in this world. A delicate and indifferent face, half lit by night lamps. The beautiful features overlap with the person in the photo. Strange yet familiar. Liu Ryan would ask me what kind of person I liked. I would ask her back, "What are you like?" She said, "I am whatever you like." I said, "I like a girl who is bright and serene like the moon. The girl I imagined, my Yanyan, looks just like this." There was a long silence on her end. Then she only sent me a smiling emoji. The chat window on her side kept popping up. I stared blankly for half a minute before sending her a message. "Liu Ryan, do you want to meet?" The next day in the cafeteria, I ran into Gu Wuyan again. He continued to cut in line, while I stood in the middle of another line, watching the boy who got cut off swallow his anger. Without saying a word, Gu Wuyan turned his head, joking with his lackeys, his blood-red lips curling up into a smile. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw me in the line. He seemed to think of something, and the smile on his lips grew even wider. He pulled his lackeys out of the line and squeezed directly between me and the person in front of me. With a jerk of his elbow, he almost pushed me into the person behind me. I staggered, barely managing to steady myself. The person in front turned back, their eyes filled with disdain, as if mocking my audacity from yesterday. I rarely saw such an ugly expression. My lips nearly bitten until they bled. I forced myself to hold back the agitation within, lowering my gaze to hide all my emotions. "You little wretch!" he spat out word by word, biting out each syllable with a mocking, harsh tone, yet every word rang clear in my ears. My reason almost collapsed. The taste of blood spread in my mouth, but I swallowed it down hard. The WeChat interface with Yanyan Baby was still paused from yesterday, with the sticker she had sent me of a kiss. "Really, sweetie? We're finally going to meet. I've been looking forward to this for so long. I've always wanted to see you. Perfect. Almost 3 years now. I'll let you know as soon as I decide on the date." "Okay, I'm so excited. Finally, I'll get to see you. What if you don't like me when we meet? I'll take that risk. No matter what my sweetie is like, I'll love them. Kiss." The chat ended there. I finished getting my food and sat in the cafeteria, reading this exchange over and over, as if trying to find something in it, but finding nothing. Before I knew Liu Ryan, I wasn't a very social child. In all these years, the only person I could truly call a friend was Ito Makoto, excluded, isolated, looked at as if I were some kind of monster. My childhood was filled with nothing but these looks, yet I hadn't done anything wrong. In those years, the only one who stayed by my side was Ito Makoto. I never learned to surrender. Gu Wuyan thought he had one. Since that night, Liu Ryan had not contacted me again. Life seemed to have returned to peace. But beneath the calm surface, a restless whirlpool lurked. I couldn't swallow this bitterness. Monday evening's elective class. The teacher was notoriously strict. There would be a closed book exam at the end of the term, and she was stingy with giving out participation points. The students who ended up in this class were either unlucky or genuinely eager to learn. The bell rang, and a stern-looking middle-aged woman picked up the roster and began calling names. I sat in my seat, listening to a string of names, while lowering my head to message Liu Ryan. Babe, when will it be? I can't wait anymore, she replied with an emoji. Right then, the teacher called my name. Ji Boda. I answered, here, and raised my hand. The teacher's gaze flickered over my face. Then she looked down and made a note on her list. No rush. The roll call continued, and I caught a familiar name clearly. I turned my head to look, only to see a face that didn't match the name. The boy raised his hand and loudly answered, here. The teacher looked over at him and nodded. My heart suddenly began to race, like a sense of anticipation. Or perhaps a warning. The teacher. A sudden, abrupt sound echoed through the classroom. The middle-aged woman's gaze was sharp as a knife, piercing straight at me. I stood up. A gentle smile curled on my lips. Politely, I detonated a thunderous bomb out of nowhere. He is not Gu Wuyan. My eyes fell on the boy's slightly panicked face. I kept my composure. Must be a substitute teacher, I thought. The classroom fell silent as the grave. I knew that the conflict between Gu Wuyan and me would only grow larger. Other teachers might not care about substitutes, but I knew this teacher would investigate. Not just investigate. I suspected that if Gu Wuyan wanted this course, he would get it too. That night back in the dorm, Liu Ryan's voice call came through. The noise was low and hoarse, filled with a tenderness deep enough to drown in. How was your day, darling? When she called someone darling, the word seemed to roll out of a jar of honey, softly falling into my ears, leaving a tingling sensation, enough to make anyone blush. Today was great, I replied with a smile, my tone betraying a hint of uncontainable joy. She seemed infected by my mood. Her tone also carried a trace of laughter. Did something good happen? Just thinking about how we're about to meet soon makes me really happy. I'm happy too. We talked on the phone for 2 hours, until I lay down on my bed. Half asleep, I heard her ask, how much longer? Soon, I whispered softly. Gu Wuyan's retaliation began 2 days after I exposed him for having someone else substitute his classes. He wanted to lock me inside the teaching building. Whenever I saw him, I ran. He couldn't catch me. Every day when I left the classroom, I wore a mask and pulled my hat down low, cautiously observing my surroundings. Careful brewing. He tried to catch me but failed. He fumed for days, but life rarely goes as planned. On the 5th day, we met unexpectedly in the cafeteria. I was carrying my favorite meal, holding the bowl with joy, looking for an empty seat to sit down. The cafeteria was crowded with people. My sharp eyes spotted a vacant spot. I walked towards it happily. The noise of people was buzzing around my ears. I was just 4 or 5 steps away, when suddenly, hot and sticky soup was poured over my head. It ran down my cheeks and slipped into my collar. There was quite a bit, splashing into my bowl of food. I stood there holding the bowl, stunned in place. The soup trickled down my neck, like a small snake, tickling. The skin burned painfully from the hot liquid. I furrowed my brows, but my gaze stayed fixed on my now ruined meal. What a waste! It's inedible now. The cafeteria fell so silent, you could hear a pin drop. The person standing before me was all too familiar. Once again, Gu Wuyan and I became the center of attention. Looking like a drenched rat, I felt utterly humiliated. He had destroyed what was left of my dignity, but at least my cap had preserved some of it. The scorching stares were all over me, making me feel extremely uncomfortable. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar figure among the onlookers. My eyes flickered. I focused again, and realized who stood opposite her. It was Gu Wuyan's girlfriend. They were here to back him up. Bastards! You damn coward! Stabbing me in the back. Who the hell gave you the guts? Huh? Gu Wuyan, furious and imposing, his blood-red lips moving, like a venomous snake's tongue, spit flying in all. directions before me, nearly landing in my eyes. He continued to spew insults. Words so vile they were unbearable to hear, worse than the stench of rotting garbage in the sewers. My dignity was trampled under his feet, bit by bit ground into dust, and my girlfriend. She just sat there, supporting Gu Wuyan, watching coldly as he abused me. What a laughable scene. The corner of my lips curved slightly under the mask, awkward and embarrassed. When Gu Wuyan finally finished cursing, he tried to rip off my mask, to tear away my last shred of dignity. The bowl in his hand smashed to the ground. I covered my face and dodged his move. You still dare to dodge, you bastard? I'm going to tear your face apart today. No! Not the mask, never the mask. I felt like a trapped beast in its final struggle, desperately protecting the mask on my face. Everyone watched coldly from the sidelines. I knew! They were afraid of Liu Ryan, who sat there, and Gu Wuyan's girlfriend. Gu Wuyan couldn't reach me. Enraged, humiliated, he swung a slap at me, his hand cutting through the air, about to strike my face. In the next second, someone caught his hand. It was not Liu Ryan, of course. I shrank my head down, expecting the slap to land, but it didn't. I opened my eyes again. A figure stood in front of me. Gu Wuyan's hand was tightly gripped by him. In a flash, a crisp sound echoed. Everyone around gasped in shock. Gu Wuyan's face was slapped heavily to the side. Liu Ryan turned her head. Her gaze fell on my face, with disdain, as if looking at trash, not even willing to linger for long. Before her eyes moved to the person standing in front of me, Gu Wuyan's girlfriend tried to stand up, but Liu Ryan held her down. Gu Wuyan clutched his face, his gaze filled with venom and resentment, yet he made no further move. The person standing in front of me turned back, expression cold and indifferent. I bit my lip and called out to him, Chen Shuai, the god of the math department, also someone whom I befriended back in elementary school. A kindred spirit through thick and thin. Our school was divided into North and South campuses. He and I were in different campuses. I had no idea why he was here today. He dragged me along, practically hauling me back to the dorm. My roommates weren't back yet. He pushed me into the bathroom without saying another word to me. The sticky soup clung uncomfortably to me, and the afternoon heat emitted a smell that wasn't exactly pleasant. I turned on the shower. When I came out, I saw him sitting in my chair, leaning back, brows furrowed. Your girlfriend sent you a message. He heard my footsteps, pointed to my phone on the desk. If I'm not mistaken, her name is Liu Ryan, right? Yeah. Liu Ryan was also from the North Campus. To prominent figures. Maybe they were closer in real life. His fingers pinched the bridge of his nose, his expression as cold as ever. She was there today, right? What happened? Isn't she your girlfriend? I didn't answer. Eyes cast down, staring at my toes. His gaze turned to me, calm but probing. Soon she won't be. I suddenly spoke, lifting my eyes to meet his. Chen Shuai's gaze was like a knife, sharp and cold, just like always. He looked at me silently. For a moment, I let him scrutinize me for a long while. Then he stood up. His fingers lightly pinched my cheek. If something's bothering you, don't keep it bottled up. Chen Shuai only left for the North Campus after having dinner with me. I walked him to the South Gate, didn't scan a code to ride a bike, but slowly walked back to the dorm. There weren't many people on the path. The streetlights cast shadows on the small road. Mosquitoes danced in the light. The wind rustled through the roadside trees, making a soft whispering sound. My mood was unusually light. I had a game session scheduled with Liu Ryan back in the dorm. Then footsteps sounded behind me, soft and steady, seeming to follow me closely from not too far away. I quickened my pace. The footsteps behind me sped up as well. Who's following me? I turned around abruptly, but there was no one behind me. The footsteps stopped suddenly. and no shadows were visible on the road. Was it just an illusion? A sense of unease crept over me. I turned and quickened my pace again, pulling out my phone to call a roommate. But suddenly, pain shot through my hand. A loud thud. The phone fell to the ground. I winced in pain and pulled my hand back, only for my arm to be seized again, gripped tightly on both sides, preventing any struggle. A foot stomped on my phone, grinding down hard. The sound of shattering glass echoed on the quiet path, and cracks formed in my heart as well. That phone! I had bought it with my own money. Used it for 3 or 4 years. It wasn't very responsive anymore. I kept it mainly because it had a large memory. Over the years, I had stored a lot of things on it. Sometimes it would freeze for half a day. The battery was also broken. I had to repair it. It had already been fixed 2 or 3 times, but it carried too much. So much that I didn't want to let it go. It held the memories of nearly 3 years between Liu Ryan and me. Her tearful confessions, the songs she sang to me in her husky, smoky voice, the soft tones she used when I was asleep at midnight, and all the little traces of the life she shared with me. Sometimes just looking at a little bit could make me happy for an entire day. Half of my face was still swollen and red. Concealer and foundation could only barely cover part of it, making Gu Wuyan appear somewhat comical. I only glanced at him, then lowered my gaze, staring intently at the phone under his foot. Bastard! He walked towards me, his leather shoes making a crisp, rhythmic tapping on the ground. Clear and melodious. Alone now, aren't you? Chen Shuai isn't here with you now. Who's going to protect you? His voice was sharp, like nails scraping across a chalkboard, piercing my eardrums painfully. All the nasty words began flooding back into my ears, bit by bit. Bastard! I heard him cursing my parents, spewing filthy words without repeating a single one. Today, I'll make sure you understand what happens when you mess with the wrong person. With a wave of Gu Wuyan's hand, the 2 men beside him dragged me into the woods. They were very strong. Their shoes made a scraping sound on the ground. I stubbornly resisted moving, fixating on the phone lying not far away. Its back glass already had a web-like crack from where Gu Wuyan had stomped on it. The 2 men behind me tried harder, gripping my wrists so tightly they hurt. Seeing me resist, they simply began dragging me along. My heels touched the grass, dragging against the small gravel. Sharp stones cut into one of my ankles. It hurt a little. They threw me to the ground. I straightened my back, looking at Gu Wuyan, who had his arms crossed. Tonight, the moonlight was bright, filtering through the layers of leaves. I could clearly see the fierce and twisted expression on his face. His face was asymmetrical. It made me feel somewhat uneasy. He raised his foot, quick and vicious, aiming to stomp on me. I quickly rolled to the side. Gu Wuyan, furious and embarrassed, shouted to pull me up. The men beside him immediately hoisted me up, as if handling livestock ready for slaughter. Gu Wuyan cracked a smile, his lips blood red. Under the moonlight, he looked like a poorly painted voodoo doll. Bastard! He raised his leg, his heel aimed at my stomach. Sneering, he kicked down hard. With both hands restrained, I could only watch helplessly as that wine-carried leg came towards me. It's going to hurt a lot, I thought. When I got back to the dorm, it was nearly closing time. The dormitory and downstairs was holding the lock. My clothes were covered in mud and grass, filthy and dirty. As I went in, I whispered an apology to her. The aunt smiled kindly and simply said it was okay. When I returned to my dorm room, my roommate was munching on chips while watching a drama. Paused when he heard the door open. Bo da, why are you back so late? And why are your clothes dirty again? I fell again, I replied softly, without taking off my mask. Are you okay? He widened his eyes. Why do you keep falling lately? Are you hurt anywhere this time? I'll put some ointment on you again. I shook my head. my arms hanging by my sides. Still feeling a bit weak, I slowly walked to the closet, grabbed some clothes, and went back into the bathroom. Warm water cascaded down from my head, and I finally felt a sense of being alive again. The bruises on my arms and thighs hadn't faded, a testament to how ruthless Liu Ryan's people were that day. There was still a faint pain when pressed. I pinched myself hard. Tears welled up instinctively, only to be washed away by the water, all flowing down the drain. As I stepped out of the bathroom, Liu Ryan's call came in. I tapped the answer button. Her slightly husky voice came through. She seemed to have endless things to say to me. I put the phone on speaker and carried a basin to wash my clothes. The mud on my pants began to dissolve in the clear water, tainting it with a brownish hue. Liu Ryan told me she saw a little cat by the roadside today and fed it some sausage. The kitten was very cute. I scrubbed the clothes harder. Darling, do you prefer cats or dogs? I paused for a moment, then replied after a while, dogs. Then in the future, we'll raise a dog. My grip relaxed. The water basin fell to the ground, cracking open. Water gushed out from the crack, spreading all over the floor. The noise was heard by Liu Ryan on the other end. She anxiously asked what had happened. Nothing, I replied. She breathed a sigh of relief. Gentle, kind, careful, and deep. Just like the persona she always showed me. So kind to stray animals. And the person on the other end kept talking about something. I didn't hear a single word she said. The unspoken words were swallowed back into my stomach. Liu Ryan. Where would we have a future? Liu Ryan found me sooner than I expected. On the third night after Gu Wuyan had blocked my way, I left the library. Someone was following behind me, walking to a place where fewer and fewer people were. The footsteps came closer and closer. I pulled my hat lower and discreetly quickened my pace. As I reached the corner, someone grabbed my collar from behind and yanked me back. I lost my footing, and she pulled me down onto the grass nearby. Luckily, the ground was soft and damp, so it didn't hurt much. Liu Ryan let go, looking down at me from above. The street lamp overhead cast a dim yellow light, but she blocked it with her body, her whole face hidden in shadow. I nervously reached for my mask. Her gaze on me was devoid of any warmth, even tinged with a bit of impatience. Gu Wuyan wants you to apologize, Liu Ryan said, looking down at me. Her words came out flat, emotionless. I sat on the ground in a mess, staring at her blankly, as if I didn't understand what she had said. Liu Ryan's features were remarkably beautiful. The first time I saw her photo, I was struck by it, like an angel fallen to earth. A cliché comparison, but I've never seen anyone who fits that description better than her. The photo she sent me, a young girl gazing at the camera, her eyes filled with gentleness, but there was still a faint, lingering coldness about her. Gentleness was the mask she gave me. Now, the one in front of me is the real Liu Ryan. Why don't you just let him vent his anger and be done with it? Why did you have to provoke him? The hostility in Liu Ryan's eyes was almost spilling over. It was the first time I saw her frown, speaking to me in an impatient tone, a small, insignificant insect. I thought blankly. This is how she sees me now. I'm not the one who's wrong. The voice from beneath the mask was hoarse, even startling myself. I stared straight into Liu Ryan's eyes, standing up tall, trying to salvage the last bit of my dignity. It was Gu Wuyan who started it. I don't care, Liu Ryan suddenly interrupted, her expression indifferent. I'm not interested in who's right or wrong. You made him lose face. Now he's unhappy. All the strength drained from my body. The words I hadn't spoken vanished in my throat. I stared at her intently. He wants you to apologize to him in front of the whole school this weekend. Liu Ryan glanced at her phone, her brows even tighter. Just agree to it. I don't really want to have to hit you. Apologize? I repeated her words, almost amused. How should I apologize? Sunday, 8 o'clock. At the West Sports Field of the school, Liu Ryan paused for a moment, kneeled down and apologized. Someone passed by at the corner. Their gaze fell on me, tinged with a bit of pity. But the moment they recognized Liu Ryan, their expressions changed instantly, and they hurried away. Silence spread. Through the night, I lowered my eyes. Breathing sounds were especially clear in the quiet night. Quick! All right. Liu Ryan paused for a moment. Don't play any tricks. If apologizing can solve the problem, don't let it turn into something bigger. I know! I interrupted her. Sunday night at 8. At the West Sports Field. I'll be there. I will definitely be there. The dormitory doors were already closed. When I took out my phone again, I saw several missed calls from my roommate. I sent him a message, telling him not to worry. Something came up tonight. I won't be back to the dorm. He quickly replied with an emoji. As soon as I exited the chat with my roommate, a new WeChat message from Liu Ryan popped up. Sweetie, why did you suddenly stop replying just now? An indescribable emotion welled up inside me. I typed out each word carefully. Liu Ryan, let's meet. Immediately, a WeChat call came through. I answered it. Liu Ryan's voice was filled with barely contained excitement. Sweetie, really? We're finally going to meet. I was still standing in the same spot. There were already few people on the road. The moon was hidden behind the clouds. The streetlights were dim. The night was silent. I could hear her breathing in my ear. I looked at the light and smiled. Of course. My tone was so sweet it made me feel a bit nauseous. Ryan, I can't wait to see you. Chen Shuai opened the door for me just as I ended the call. His eyes focused on the stains on my pants, silently asking for an explanation with his gaze. A little accident, I said calmly. Accident? He echoed. His words came out quickly, without any emotional fluctuation. And what about this? He held his phone screen in front of me, displaying a screenshot. Sunday night at 8. At the West Sports Field. Everyone come and watch a good show. Gu Wuyan's name was prominently displayed at the top, along with a photo. It seemed to be taken tonight by Liu Ryan. I was wearing a mask, my hat pulled down low, sitting on the ground, looking quite disheveled. The campus wall had a post dedicated to Gu Wuyan, which had gained a lot of attention. There were many comments below, though none dared to speak openly. They only hinted subtly. Ji Boda. Chen Shuai's face remained as cold as ever. Tell me, what is this? I took off my mask, looked at him and smiled. A fox borrowing the might of a tiger. The morning sunlight streamed through the window panes, and my biological clock woke me up early. Chen Shuai was still asleep. I rubbed my eyes and saw a message from Liu Ryan sent 5 minutes ago. Sweetie, I'm up. So excited. Kiss, kiss. Finally, I'm going to meet my darling. I pressed the screen lock button, put on my slippers, and quietly left the room. On the balcony, my jacket from yesterday was hanging, fluttering in the wind. I took a hanger to retrieve it. Are you going to wear this to your date? I turned around. I saw Chen Shuai was already up, leaning against the balcony railing, giving me a cold look. Perhaps. I took the jacket and folded it neatly. The summer jacket was very thin. Folded up, it fit perfectly in my shoulder bag, without looking bulky. It's a surprise. The morning breeze brushed my face, carrying a hint of lingering coolness. Chen Shuai's pajamas fluttered a bit in the wind. Since childhood, he always had that poker face. He yawned, then turned around and went back to his room. Call me if you need anything. The time on my phone shifted from 9:59 to 10 o'clock. The wind chime at the door of the milk tea shop jingled. The glass window beside me was tapped. I turned around and saw her standing in the sunlight, the corner of her dress lifted by the wind. Her eyes were filled with a gentle smile. Sweetie! Liu Ryan smiled with her brows and eyes. I couldn't hear her voice, but I could still recognize the same indulgent tone from her lip movements. I picked up my bag, and quickly walked out of the milk tea shop. The morning sun was just right, casting light on her delicate features. The roar of a car engine sounded from the roadside. Liu Ryan, like a magician, pulled out a bouquet from behind her back. But even the flowers in her arms couldn't compare to her, not even a little. The moment I stood in front of her, the person from the photo seemed to truly come to life. A bright and serene girl. Liu Ryan. Liu Ryan reached out, touching my face. Her actions so intimate, as if we had always been so close. I saw the deep love in her eyes, and heard the unmistakable joy in her voice. We finally meet, sweetie. Yes, we finally meet. Liu Ryan. Liu Ryan really liked G. Boder. How much did she like him? She liked him enough to ask for a meeting again and again, only to fall silent every time I refused. She liked him so much that she once asked me, "Do you prefer a Chinese or Western wedding?" She liked him so much that, even though she was allergic to seafood, she still peeled shrimp for me with a smile. Streetlights began to light up. The roadside stalls were filled with a lively atmosphere. I refused Liu Ryan's request to take me to an expensive restaurant and instead pulled her to sit at a street-side stall. For someone like Liu Ryan, a rich young lady, she wasn't used to the environment of a roadside stall. I could visibly see the stiffness in her as she sat down, but the moment she met my eyes, her expression softened again. "Eat healthy," Liu Ryan said softly after hearing me read. "Always. These kinds of street-side stalls, they're delicious, but not healthy. Let's come less often in the future. Okay." I nodded lightly. She smiled and gently ruffled my hair, her gaze never leaving me for a moment. Liu Ryan insisted on paying the bill for the day. From the beginning, she carefully stood by my side, intentionally or unintentionally touching my hand. When I finally grabbed her hand, her ears turned a shade of pink. From then on, she tightly intertwined her fingers with mine, as if afraid I would run away. She was completely focused on me, her heart and her eyes, all about me. The steaming barbecue and shrimp crabs were brought to the table, each shrimp soaked in sauce, its color vibrant and bright, making one's mouth water. I was just about to reach for it when Liu Ryan stopped me. She took one from the bowl, clumsily peeling off the shrimp shell, and placed it in my bowl. I was momentarily stunned. "I'll peel it. You just eat." I knew Liu Ryan had a cleanliness obsession, and I also knew she was allergic to these things. I had deliberately told the vendor not to provide gloves. The orange all dripped from her hand onto the table, her slender and fair hands, like a work of art. She looked at me with lowered eyes. Her eyes were filled with tenderness, reflecting a small version of me within them. "Boda, all you need to do is enjoy eating. For the rest of your life, I will take care of you." The person in her eye smiled slightly, but did not respond. The night deepened. Liu Ryan went to settle the bill with the owner. I walked a bit towards the outside, stopped by the roadside to hail a car. The backseat door opened as I pulled it. The evening wind was strong, sending a shiver through me. Liu Ryan happened to see this. She quickly finished paying and walked towards me. I took out a jacket from my bag and put it on. The late wind grew fiercer. A strand of Liu Ryan's hair was lifted by it. The moonlight and street lamps' glow both fell upon her. She ran towards me, carrying the bouquet I had left on the chair. Just 4 or 5 steps away, I suddenly spoke. "Don't come any closer." Liu Ryan's footsteps halted abruptly. Her face showed confusion, but she froze the moment our eyes met. "Boda!" She called my name cautiously. The wind howled. The time on my phone jumped to 10 o'clock sharp, as if a lazy frog's clock had been struck. All the dreams vanished in an instant. But I am not a toad, and Liu Ryan is not a swan. 12 hours. 3 years since I met Liu Ryan. Back then, she was reclusive, world-weary, cold, starved for affection, every conversation tinged with disdain for her current life. I pretended not to notice, stayed by her side, bit by bit, patiently waited for her to open up. Until now, she has grown into the appearance of a graceful gentleman. 3 years of phone calls, 3 years of companionship, 3 years like water flowing under a bridge. Now it ends with a full stop. Liu Ryan's dream ends here. She had written me into her plans. She thought we had a future. She painted countless pictures of our future together. But sadly, there could never be a future for us. The moonlight was cold and indifferent. I pulled the hood of my jacket down, spread my arms, and smiled at her. Liu Ryan, does this look familiar? I watched as her face turned paler and paler. Her expression shattered like fine porcelain. Liu Ryan's lips moved, but all that came out was a faint, meaningless breath. Confused, afraid, yet unable to find the right words to say. She took a step forward, trying to approach me. Don't come closer. I stepped back and turned to the car door. She was struck by my gaze. Her face grew even paler. Her steps faltered, but she still stopped. Boda, Liu Ryan. I cut her off. The weather is perfect. See you tomorrow at the West Playground, 8 o'clock. Don't be late. Those words felt like the final sentence, like a quick chug of bitter beer. She nearly lost her balance, as if she had lost her soul. She hurried toward me, trying to grab my hand. Boda, no! I quickly got into the taxi, urging the driver to start the car. At the moment, we brushed past each other. I smiled at her through the car window. Liu Ryan, don't make him lose face. I will definitely be there. When Chen Shuai picked me up downstairs, I was just blocking the 4th number Liu Ryan had used to call me. He had returned from his evening workout, a thin layer of sweat still on his face. How are you feeling? Broke up, I said. Chen responded with a simple and nothing more. I followed him into the room. Failed. His hand paused as he poured me a glass of water. But then, as if nothing had happened, he handed the glass to me. I took it. Looking up at him, he didn't avoid my gaze. I guessed it, he said with the same expression he had 3 years ago, when he sneered and asked me why I was so free. Liu Ryan kept changing phones, calling and texting me. Before sleeping, I blocked the last number she had used and sent her a single message back. 8 o'clock! Don't be late! Time passes quickly, like 3 years in an instant. During dinner, Chen Shuai's phone kept ringing. He glanced at it and then hung up. I put down my chopsticks, looking at him with a hint of curiosity. It's Liu Ryan calling, he said, expression indifferent. She wants to talk to you. No need. The clock's hands wavered on the wall. The R hand pointed to 6. I stood up, smiling. Whatever needs to be said can be said in person. When I arrived at the field, it was already almost dark. There were a lot of people on the track, far more than usual, in small groups, walking around, stretching their necks, as if searching for something. Under the podium, the lights were dazzling, like a stage prepared just for us. I pulled my hat down lower and walked straight in that direction. Sharp-eyed people noticed, recognizing my clothes, stared at me a few times, then whispered to their companions beside them. Eyes like searchlights constantly focused on me, along with an endless stream of gossip, buzzing around me like flies, making one feel disgusted. Weren't you all cocky that day? And here you are today, obediently coming to apologize to Brother Gu Wuyan. A voice as sharp as a crow's suddenly rang out. My identity was publicly revealed, and those gazes became even more brazen, forming a circle around me, creating an open space. I looked at the person speaking, one of the lackeys that Gu Wuyan brought along that night. He folded his arms, his face full of the sneering and mockery of a victor facing a defeated opponent. I looked away, saying nothing. He pushed his luck, reaching out his hand, trying to shove me again. I didn't dodge, but suddenly a hand reached out midway, blocking in front of me, and pushed his hand away. The boy winced in pain, eyes wide, just about to curse back. But he fell silent. My gaze passed through the two of them, and I saw Gu Wuyan stepping out from the crowd. His cheeks were still slightly swollen, but finally symmetrical. Step by step. Not even a few meters, yet his walk was difficult and slow. The surroundings suddenly quieted down. The main character took the stage. The drama was finally about to begin. Brother Gu, the lackey, seeing him appear, quickly stood behind him, like he had found his support, regaining his swagger. Gu Wuyan looked at me, but the arrogance from before was gone. He didn't dare look at Liu Ryan, who was standing in front of me. His eyes fixed on me, but the malice in his gaze never diminished. He straightened his back, his hands at his sides clenched tightly. Embarrassing, isn't it? Frustrating, isn't it? He wanted to reclaim his dignity through me. He wanted to use me to prove that his status couldn't be challenged by anyone. But unfortunately, his wishful thinking fell apart. I could imagine how he wanted nothing more than to tear me to pieces. But now, he had no choice but to swallow his pride. The crowd around us grew larger. The whispers grew louder when they saw no movement from us. I grew impatient and spoke first. Liu. Before I could finish, I heard Liu Ryan in front of me speak calmly. Gu Wuyan. Gu Wuyan's body trembled slightly, almost imperceptibly. His eyes met mine again. The resentment in them deepened. But still under Liu Ryan's intimidation. Slowly, stiffly, he opened his mouth. Sorry, sorry. Gu Wuyan's voice was loud, successfully drawing a gasp from the lackeys behind him. One of his foolish sidekicks shouted in panic, Brother Gu, what are you saying? Why are you apologizing to him? He's the one who should apologize to you. This outburst silenced everyone around, making the crowd quiet down. Gu Wuyan's face looked even worse. He whispered sharply, Shut up! But his sidekick was too dumb to stop. Why, Brother Gu? He's the one who should apologize. Weren't you going to make him kneel and apologize today? That single sentence stirred up a storm. Yes. I stepped around Liu Ryan, standing before her. I'm here to apologize to you. I shouldn't have pushed you when you cut in line. So, I met his gaze. I'm here to kneel and apologize to you. The words kneel and apologize were heavily emphasized by me. Someone behind me tried to grab my hand, but I quickly shook it off. Bo da! I ignored her. Just kept smiling at Gu Wuyan, as calm as water. For a long time, the person behind me spoke, her tone as indifferent as that night. When she didn't care who was at fault. Gu Wuyan. The insinuation in her tone was unmistakably clear. Gu Wuyan's face turned pale. His body trembled, lips pressed tightly together, bit by bit. He bent his knees. All eyes were focused on him alone, heavy as 1,000 pounds, gradually bending his spine. In just 1 week, our roles had reversed. The one whose dignity was trampled became him. The drama reached its climax, but Gu Wuyan was like a poorly acting performer, reluctant to finish his part. But it didn't matter. It didn't stop him from becoming a laughingstock from this day forward. No one would ever cover for his outrageous behavior again. His support was gone forever. I heard the whispers from the crowd, flashlights capturing Gu Wuyan's disgraceful state. Cold stares and mockery descended upon him. My mood suddenly lifted. I leaned down close to Gu Wuyan's ear, chuckling softly. I told you, without Liu Ryan, you are nothing. Cicadas chirped noisily in the trees. Only the sound of their calls and the breath of those around remained in the woods. The three of them huddled together looked especially ridiculous. Gu Wuyan's expression was filled with fear, yet he still shouted in anger. I won't let you get away with this. I ignored his fury. I only lowered my gaze and smiled at him. The moment my fingers clamped onto his chin, his body flinched backward involuntarily. He was forced to meet my eyes. Let me go. Damn it! His words were cut off. by the crisp sound of a slap. Now it's symmetrical, I remarked. The companions behind him gasped. Their eyes widened. Gu Wuyan's face turned to one side again, as if stunned by the blow, taking a long time to come back to his senses. You hit me? Bastard! You dare! I stomped my foot on his leg. Not letting me go? You can't do it! Without Liu Ryan. You are nothing! Bastard! Just wait! Tomorrow I'll be waiting. Bring it on, my girlfriend. Come face me. On the way back to the dorm, Liu Ryan followed behind me, walking the whole way, without saying a word. Her breathing was always close behind. Several times, she seemed like she wanted to speak but stopped herself, eventually settling into silence. Until we reached the dormitory building, I suddenly turned around, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were somewhat evasive, but in that instant, they seemed to grab hold of a lifeline. Bo-da! I'm sorry. I didn't know. Liu Ryan. I interrupted her. I reached out my hand. Under the dim streetlight, the bruises on my arm were still clearly visible. Do you see it clearly now? I met her gaze, softly calling her like before. Ryan, do you see it clearly? It's been over 20 days, and it's still here. Liu Ryan took a step back, her posture unstable, her eyes fixed on the bruises, as if she had lost her soul, staring intently. People are like this, only when their actions involve themselves. Do they truly perceive the pain within? Everything Liu Ryan ever did to me, up until now, would become a weapon, cutting deep into her heart, making her suffer unbearably. After Liu Ryan disappeared from my life for 3 or 4 days, she reappeared again. At noon after class, I went to the cafeteria to line up for lunch. I came early, and there were fewer people in line at the popular counter than usual. I was in a good mood. Standing in line waiting, the number of people in front of me gradually decreased. A familiar figure appeared at the side of the line. Gu Wuyan and his lackey. He spotted a position, trying to use the same old trick as before. But this time, he didn't succeed as he did in the past. He was pushed away. He flushed with anger and shame, just about to start cursing. But someone else cursed him first. What are you doing? Still daring to cut in line? Shameless, aren't you? Everyone was usually afraid of his thug girlfriend, and more so of Liu Ryan, who had always backed them up. Liu Ryan's family was rich and powerful. So when Liu Ryan no longer stood by his side, Gu Wuyan was nothing at all. I averted my gaze, no longer interested in his drama. Happily, I got my meal and looked for a place to sit down. The cafeteria was getting crowded. I stood among the people, my eyes constantly searching. Finally finding a good spot, I carried my bowl over. It was the exact same scenario as that day, only 4 or 5 steps away. As I passed a table, someone suddenly grabbed my hand. My bowl wobbled a bit. Luckily, the food didn't spill. I looked at the culprit who grabbed me, and it was none other than Liu Ryan, who had disappeared for a few days. She looked like she hadn't slept well. Dark circles under her eyes, her expression weary, yet her appearance was still striking, with a kind of desolate beauty. I looked at her, but didn't say a word. Bo-da! Liu Ryan called my name cautiously. I'm sorry. Her expression was clearly trying to please me. For everything I've done to you. If it can't be compensated, can you at least return it to me? Return? I felt like laughing. How? The hand holding my wrist suddenly tightened, forcing the bowl in my hand to tilt. Dark sauce and food, with the tilt of the bowl, all spilled onto Liu Ryan. The food stuck to her hair. Dark sauce ran down her face, forming a stark contrast with her pale skin, then dripped onto her white shirt, staining a large area. A girl nearby let out a scream, instantly making us the center of attention again. Liu Ryan let go of my hand. When the others looked over, They only saw me splashing a bowl of food all over Liu Ryan. Someone gasped, but Liu Ryan didn't care about these stares. Her gaze remained fixed on my face, her voice hoarse, her posture almost humbling herself into the dust. Bo-da, I beg you, give it all back to me. Don't. For the first time, the proud Miss Liu was pleading. Her eyes reddened at the corners, filled with entreaty. She used to say, I humiliated Gu Wuyan. He was unhappy. Later, she humiliated Gu Wuyan herself, trampled him into the dust. Now, she had humiliated herself, and she wanted me to forgive her. But Liu Ryan, things in this world are not settled just by an eye for an eye, and everything becomes clear. The cafeteria was noisy with chatter, and once again the sound of gossip surrounded me. Liu Ryan was waiting for my answer. She was destined to be disappointed. Liu Ryan. The bowl in my hand was already empty. I lowered my eyes and softly said, This is the dish I've been wanting to eat for a long time. She froze for a moment, her expression slowly crumbling. Liu Ryan had said, an eye for an eye. When her message came through, I was playing a game with Chen Shuai. She sent it using a new number, probably changed countless times. The meeting place was where she had first blocked me with her people. Chen Shuai glanced at me. I put down the phone and tossed it aside. Aren't you going? No! I leaned against the back of the sofa. It's just watching her get abused by someone else. It's dark now. I'm too lazy to go. Chen Shuai said nothing. I propped myself up, lazily smiling as I looked at him. I used to think dating Liu Ryan was fun. Then she appeared. I suddenly realized there were more interesting things to watch. Watching someone's emotional breakdown, seeing her overwhelmed by guilt, watching her regret deeply, in pain and suffering. When I was a child, I was isolated. They said my father was a murderer, despised me, even threw stones at me. I had done nothing wrong. Chen Shuai was an illegitimate child from a wealthy family. His mother, unaware, was deceived into being a mistress. Children's disgust was more direct than that of adults. It was a merciless past. My father, a murderer, killed my mother. The so-called love became the shackles she imposed on herself for the one she loved, and ultimately became the weapon that took her life. 3 years ago, Chen Shuai asked me in the park. I lowered my gaze and sighed. Maybe this is the greatness of love. But what is love? Is it a hideous desire for possession? Or the dual-faced nature of humanity? I don't know. The video of Liu Ryan was sent to my email. The very next day, a 10-minute-long recording, showing her surrounded by people, not resisting at all, silently enduring the violence inflicted by several people. Some couldn't bear to hit her hard. Their punches fell lightly, only to be yelled at by her. She was like a madwoman, self-destructively demanding that they hit harder. Harder still. I watched the entire video expressionlessly. Along with the video came her request to meet, a lengthy confession spanning thousands of words, which I ignored. I replied with a single email asking her where she was. She responded instantly, as always, carefully asking me where it would be convenient she would come to find me. I gave the address of a cafe set for the afternoon. Liu Ryan showed up on time. She looked more haggard and seemed thinner as well. Her white-sleeved shirt looked a bit loose. There was still a fresh bruise on the corner of her mouth. The moment she saw me, her eyes brightened for a second, but quickly dimmed again. Din Da. Liu Ryan called my name tentatively, cautiously, with a pitiful expression, like a stray dog that had been abandoned. I responded with a sound. She immediately seemed a bit happy, no longer having the arrogance in her brows that she once did. I'm sorry, Boda. Forgive me, please. I didn't know it was you. I didn't know it was me. I put down the cup in my hand, interrupting her. Liu Ryan had apologized many times, switching from one phone number to another, sending long and short messages of remorse. She was afraid of losing me. Liu Ryan, you have never realized where you went wrong. She apologized to me because I am G Boater, the one she held dear in her heart. But if I was nothing, just an ordinary student, caught in an unforeseen disaster, would she think she was wrong then? She wouldn't. What she did to me was completely insignificant to me. I never cared about the humiliation or the pain. When she was categorized as a bully, from the moment we met for the first time, I knew there was no possibility for us anymore. Someone who lacks emotions never understands love or being loved. What drove me to play out this drama was simply curiosity. Human emotions are strange. At first, accompanying Liu Ryan. To me, she was no different from anyone else. Then, when she suddenly encountered misfortune, calling me and crying, the moment her emotions collapsed, I suddenly noticed a peculiar feeling. I had never experienced such vivid emotions before. Just like I could feel that Liu Ryan truly loved me, she could also sense that my feelings for her were never that deep. I wanted to find the answer from her, the answer about love. But in the end, I still failed. To me, a moral line must never be crossed. But it was so close. I stood up, my gaze falling on the bruise at the corner of her mouth, and I said with a smile, Liu Ryan, do you know? It was really just a little bit closer. If you had cursed at me just a bit more, I might have fallen for you. But unfortunately, a bully will never be worthy. Liu Ryan's face turned pale in an instant, her body swaying, about to collapse. Once again, Liu Ryan vanished from my life. Her name was mentioned again, this time by Chen Shuai. The background noise in the video on his phone was chaotic. Chen Shuai handed me his phone. Liu Ryan came to see me before. Oh, she asked how she could make you forgive her. What did you say? I asked. Chen Shuai reached for a cigarette, but I stopped him. He obediently put the cigarette down. I told her you would never forgive a bully. I smiled ambiguously. Chen Shuai gestured for me to watch the video. I'm not sure if she understood what I meant. I replayed the video. A harsh background noise blared again. The image wasn't clear. There were many people in the video, but the most prominent was a thin figure, head bowed low, apologizing humbly and submissively. The camera didn't capture the person in front of her, but you could hear the angry voice off screen. Now you apologize? Is that any use? The voice was filled with grievance and bitterness, and finally in a rage. He shouted, and you still want forgiveness? Kneel properly and apologize to me. Then I'll forgive you. Liu Ryan's figure trembled slightly. Those two words in the sentence struck her heart with precision. The atmosphere fell silent for a moment. The next second, she steadily bent her knees toward that person. The video abruptly ended. I heard she went to seek forgiveness from those she had bullied before. This video went viral on the school's forum. I finished watching with a smile, casually handed the phone back to Chen Shuai. Do you know why Liu Ryan likes me so much? Chen Shuai looked at me. Not really. Her original family was too cold and distant. Her parents didn't love her. Behind the glamorous facade was an icy barrier. In her childhood, there was only an empty house, with parents who never spoke much to her. She had no one to confide in. All her words stuck in her throat, unable to come out. Only her grandmother was the one person who loved her. Losing that person, the pain in her heart was immeasurable. Then she met me. During the time when her grandmother passed away, I was there for her. She opened up the softest part of her heart to me. After losing the person she loved the most, I became her lifeline. I was kind to her. Whatever she said, I comforted her gently. She loves me. She became a shield for people like Gu Wuyan because she felt insecure, other than those she cared about. She didn't care about anyone else's life or death, including Gu Wuyan. Cold and ruthless. But this is who she truly is. The damage from her original family is hard to heal. In the end, she still grew up to be this kind of person. Liu Ryan didn't stop looking for me. The most intense time. It was raining at night. She had drunk too much, and no one could stop her. She called me. Her voice on the other end was hoarse, even carrying a hint of sobbing. She called my name over and over again. Oda. I truly know I was wrong. I apologized to each of them. I begged them to forgive me. Please, Oda, don't abandon me. Her voice broke again. There were people in the background trying to calm her down. Someone took the phone from her, sounding a bit angry. Bro, I'm begging you, say something nice to Sister Yan. If she drinks any more, she really won't make it. I stayed silent for a moment. Brother Boater. Liu Ryan's tone was all over the place. Boda, I'm begging you, don't throw me away. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Don't leave me. Boda. 2 years ago, when her grandmother passed away, Liu Ryan called me in the middle of the night. The same hoarse voice, asking me, will you stay with me? I softened my voice to comfort her. Reassuring her gently, I said, I will be with you. And now, here she was again, crying, begging me not to leave, pleading for me not to abandon her. The night was as dark as ink. I looked out the window, my voice calm. Liu Ryan, don't debase yourself. Later, Chen Shuai told me she stood downstairs all that night, in the rain at midnight, and was taken to the hospital in the morning. I listened, shrugged it off like a joke, and forgot. I had known for a long time. Liu Ryan was arrogant, proud, beautiful on the outside, but empty on the inside. None of that mattered. What I wished for was that she could be my redemption, but she wasn't. She wasn't the moon. The misfortune of her original family was not an excuse for becoming a bully's accomplice. Some things are simply unforgivable.